What's going on, guys? So I suppose that most everyone has heard about the results in Alabama when it comes to the attempt to bring in a union at the Amazon warehouse in Alabama. Now, today's video is going to be, of course, there's a purpose to it, but it's going to be me rambling. It's going to be me rambling about my personal experience as a fellow Southerner person, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and kind of giving people an insight into what it's like, even today, to live in the South, places like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, etc. Now, I don't want anyone to get me wrong. They, of course, are no longer, at least on a regular, it does happen still occasionally, but they're no longer, night riding in the South. And, they're no longer hanging brothers with impunity now down there. So it's not like that. We're not quite fighting the struggle that our beloved ancestors fought for us to get many of the privileges in which we experience today. However, racism is still alive and well in the South, and it's getting better for two reasons. Number one, and I want to say this, I do recognize that it is getting better, but number one, because as the generations go on, even in the South, racism starts to take a back seat. Also, people from other parts of the world and other parts of the country are filtering in to Georgia. I recently went back for a visit and barely recognized. I could feel the vibe. There was just a whole lot different. And I'm not just talking about the infrastructure. The infrastructure was also different. They've been doing a lot of construction projects and things of that nature, but the people just felt different. Even the last time I went back to visit. So yeah, things are definitely changing, but unfortunately, the racism there is still very, very noticeable. If you're someone who lives there, and particularly if you're someone who works around a lot of people who are from there, the quest to protect white privilege is still there. Now, you may be asking, hey, Chris, what does this have to do with the Amazon vote? Well, we're going to get to that because I'm going to tell you 3 stories about my personal experience. The first one isn't necessarily anything to do with the union or trying to get a union or working for a union company, but it is an introduction to the daily life of a black man, at least, living in the South. You live there long enough, you will experience something very similar to what I'm going to tell you in the first story. The second story is going to be about me working for a company that is very similar to Amazon, trying to bring the union in. In fact, we came very, very close to it. And the third story is going to be me actually working for a union company and explaining to you the fact that racism is at least still practiced very much in even a union environment in the South, and how strange many of the union members are in the South. Many of them, you would think they're Democrats, right? Many of them are not. Many Republicans that's from the South who work for unions, they're very strange. Many of them are still not only Republicans, they're diehard Republicans. And but I'm going to get to that. It is kind of a story of good and bad, because they're also going to be, I'm not just going to tell you about white people who did racist things. I'm also going to tell you about white people who revealed the fact that racist things were being done. And that is how it was revealed to me. These aren't situations where I had to guess what was going on. I had a front seat or a friend or associate who had a front seat by being white in different events where they were able to pretty much tell me what happened. So pretty much all of this is going to be based on fact. It's not going to be any question about it. It's going to be a situation where you're pretty much going to know, unless you're just trying to deny it, just because. You're going to know that what I'm telling you, other than you just have to take my word for it that these things are true. But if you're from Georgia or somewhere like Georgia, you pretty much hear these stories and you'd be like, I can definitely believe that. I had things like that happen to me before. But understand also about these 3 stories. These are just 3 stories. This isn't telling the whole story. This isn't telling my whole life. Also understand that as bad as these things may be, I was really I'm not religious, but I guess you could say I was kind of blessed. I've never really experienced the worst of racism. So there is that. So even though what I'm about to tell you is bad, please trust me, it can certainly get a whole lot worse. So the first story is a story when I first entered the transportation industry, and I pretty much already knew how to drive a truck. I was going to a school where a good 30% of us already knew how to drive a truck. I knew how to drive a truck because I worked for a friend whose father had a small trucking company, and I was able to learn how to drive a truck, driving the truck around on the yard of his warehouse. I was what you might call like a yard dog. So I knew the mechanics of driving a truck. There were a couple of other guys who also knew how to drive a truck. I can't remember their exact backstories, but there was one guy named Chris, like me. He was a white guy, very stereotypically Southern. I mean, you hear the twang in his voice, and he's very proud of it. Very nice guy. The other white guys, a couple of them were from various places around the country. They weren't from the South. May have been like 1 or 2 from the South or whatever. But one of the things I do remember is they hated Chris. They hated Chris because I guess in their view, they kind of viewed him as an embarrassment. They kind of felt like he was a Jethro Bodine type. In fact, when he wasn't around, they would make those kind of comments, and they would want us black guys to know that, hey, we're embarrassed by that guy, Now, the odd thing is that when it came to driving, Chris was the bomb. I mean, he knew how to drive. And he came also from an environment where he had an opportunity to learn how to drive a truck, but he had just not yet had a license. I'm not going to get too much into his background because that's not too important, but just know that he was just there like me to get the certificate, not necessarily because he needed to be there. And at that time, companies were really picky. They didn't want to just take your word that you knew. They wanted some certification from you, a piece of paper showing that you had actually been officially trained. Had something to do with insurance, but anyway. So they liked him when it came to that because he was very nice and he would help them out in any way that he could. And me, myself, in fact, me and a couple of the brothers that got us spoke about it, we were like, isn't that kind of a trip how they talk about this dude behind his back, but when they need something, they're real nice to him. But anyway, Chris was one of these white guys who really insisted that racism does not exist. I know. And he and we used to debate about it almost every single day. And I'll be honest with you, until I experienced something, which you're going to hear about in the story, I always thought that he was a racist himself, just a nice guy. Because I always thought there's no way possible that anybody could actually be naive enough to believe that racism isn't still a thing. I mean, who can actually think like that? So I always thought, he's just talking trash. But anyway, I would debate him every day, and we would sit, and it was always friendly. It was never, anything where we were about to get into it or anything like that. In fact, he and we had went out to lunch a couple of times, and we were always debating, man, because I just could not believe, how can you possibly really believe that there's no racism? That, you got to be like full of shit, really, is basically what I was thinking. Well, there came a time, fast forward, when the last day of school was coming about, and we needed to come in, and we needed to take our written exam. And then we needed to take a road test, which means we needed to actually get in a tractor and trailer and go out on the road. And we needed to pass that part of the test. And then you would get an envelope with a seal on it, and then you take it to the DMV. Well, that particular morning, I forgot exactly why, I decided to show up to school very, very early, way before opening. I think I wanted to study or something. I forgot what it was. But anyway, I showed up, and I remember I stopped at McDonald's, and which I hate, but it was convenient. And I stopped at McDonald's and got some McDonald's breakfast. And I pulled up to the school and noticed that the lights were on, and I noticed that it seemed to be some people inside. Now, this was so early, I was really surprised to see people inside. So I thought, man, did I miss something? Did they agree to come in early to take the test and I missed that part or what? I'm really concerned now. I'm scared that I'm missing the test. When I walked into the school, I noticed in the classroom there was nothing but the white students in there. I immediately noticed that, which was very strange to me. And they looked up at me, and a couple of them said, "Hey, Chris," and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" The instructor, who was an old grumpy white guy with a rebel flag in the front and back of his car, he was only one of 4 instructors. He was the one giving the exam, which was kind of bad luck for all of us because, he, like I said, he was an old grumpy white guy. We would just rather it had been one of the other instructors because he was really cool. But I went back out to my car and I ate my breakfast. I went over some material, and because the instructor didn't say anything. I said, "Hey, were we supposed to take the test?" And he said, "No, it's not time for you to take the test yet." I said, "So I'm not late?" He said, "No." So I walked back out to the car. I thought, okay, that's strange. Okay, so he's giving the test at different times or whatever. So I'm thinking I must have missed that part. But I'm also noticing that the truck that we're supposed to use to go on the road test is still in the garage. Hadn't been road tested or anything. So I'm thinking, okay, what they're going to do, they're going to come out of the school while we're taking the written test. They're going to pull the truck out, pre-trip it and all of that, and then they're going to go on their road test. And then we'll come out when they're done, and then by the time they're finished taking the road test, we'll then take our road test. But they never came out. He came out, went to his car, did something, but I never saw those other guys. Now I'm parked kind of like on the side of the building. I'm not parked where we would normally park. What I didn't know was that he had given those guys his envelope with their envelopes with the seal on it for them to go up to the DMV and get their CDLs. So I totally missed them. So I said, okay, that's good. He didn't make him take the road test. So I guess he's going to let us slide, because really at that point, we had already been out on the road like several hours anyway. They knew that we could drive. So we took the written test, all black guys, one black guy and one Latino dude in the room taking the test. I'm still thinking this is really strange. So we all take the test. And to my surprise, when we get through taking the written test, this guy tells us, one of us, to go out to the garage and pull out the truck. Now we're going to take the road test. And I was like, "Oh, we're going to take the road test?" And he said, "Yeah, you're going to take the road test." I said, "Well, you didn't make those other guys take the road test, so why do we need to take it?" He said they did take it. I said, "Oh, okay, that's strange because the truck is in the garage." And he said, "Yeah, I made him put it back in the garage," which was weird, right? So I said, okay. So we went outside. I made it a point to go up to the garage with the guy who was going to pull it out, and noticed that the engine was ice cold. So the truck obviously had not been used. So I mentioned it to him, and, he just kind of grumbled and, didn't really say anything. I said, okay. So while we're all taking the test, there was one dude who always kind of struggled, and somebody made a joke and said, "Oh, he's going to do something. He's going to hit something. He's not going to pass." And I said right in front of the instructor, I said, "You know what? From what I witnessed today, everybody better get their CDLs today. There better not be one person that don't get their CDLs." And by this time, I had kind of already told the other dudes what happened in the morning. So anyway, we all did. Let's fast forward. We all passed, our road trip. We got our envelopes with the seal. DMV was so busy that day. When we got up there, those guys were still in the line. They were way up, but they were still in the line. I went up there to talk to Chris. And Chris and the other guys, the other white guys, were surprised that we had to take the road test. And I said, so how'd you guys happen to come in so early and take the test? Apparently this instructor had went to each one of them individually and told them to come in early, but he didn't tell any of us black guys that. So there's that. Then now here they are confirming that they did not have to take the road test at all. And they said, no, he just gave us our envelope after we took our written test. And he told us, hey, congratulations. And that was it. And we left. So Chris, the guy who always claims racism doesn't exist, he's pissed. Now, I'm not sure whether he's just pretending to be pissed or if he's just, because if he's pretending, he's doing a really good job. He's really hot and bothered by this. He's like, I can't believe it, man. I can't believe he actually made you guys take the road test. I said, yep, he made us take the road test. Right? Now, this is about like maybe 30 years ago or something like that. Yeah, I'm old. But I said, so, yeah, this is kind of bothering me too. Now, I'm a little activist or whatever. So, this is kind of bothering me, and I already know I'm going to do something. I just don't know what it is quite yet. So I got Chris's phone number and I got the other dude's phone number. And I went home to write an email to the school about it. Now, what I didn't know was that Chris was also writing an email to the school about it. I had no idea about this. I wrote an email to the school that night. That morning, they called me early in the morning and told me to come up to the school. Now, I got to give the school a whole lot of credit. They handled this thing beautifully. They handled it beautifully. They went all in to correct this problem. First of all, when I got there, the cool instructors who were there told me that dude got fired before I came in. They told him to get the hell off the property. He got fired. He had just gotten fired. I was like, good. So I went in the office, and really that was enough for me. I went in the office and I spoke to the dude, the owner of the school. And he said, after we finished talking, he's a real nice guy. He told me that Chris had also emailed him. And he said that he wasn't going to show me the email. He said because Chris's email was very belligerent. So I said, really? He said, yeah, he was really mad about it. And yeah, there's no doubt that what you say happened. And I spoke to a couple of the other guys. I called them up and they confirmed it, said that's what happened. And, now right about this time, also, I have to say this, he could get in a whole lot of trouble for this. He's I'm not going to get into detail, but the guy also put his school at risk. Okay. All of us got our training for free. He said, don't worry about paying anything. I'm going to go ahead and give you the paperwork that shows you don't owe the school any money or anything like that. And they made money, they made money. I mean, this school was one of the most popular schools because, it was reasonably priced and, pretty good school, but so he said, so you don't owe the school any money, anything like that. And he says, man, I deeply apologize. And he said, I also appreciate you bringing this to my attention. And I was like, okay, and spoke to the other instructors there for a while. And man, they were chuckling it up. Apparently they didn't really like the guy either. And I got home and I called Chris. And, Chris was like, man, I can't believe it. And I just thought to myself, I said, wow, this guy really believes that this sort of thing never happened. Because like I said, I just always thought, he was kind of just pulling my leg. He knew it, because there are people out there who do that. They know racism exists and they deny racism because, well, they don't want people fighting against it. They kind of want people to just accept that's how it is. But apparently, Chris was one of these people who really believed it. And clearly he was not a racist because before I could even jump on it, he had already jumped on it. And basically the decision to fire this dude and the decision to not make us pay for being discriminated against so blatantly was already made before I had even gotten to the school. So my, email wasn't belligerent at all, by the way. I think I want to say that. But I was very adamant about the fact that I was going to take it to a higher level because I felt that it was wrong. Okay, so that's the first story. Okay, the second story is going to be about me working for a company that is trying to bring in the union. I was working for a fuel company where we were delivering fuel to the different gas stations around the state of Georgia. The way the pay was set up then, it wasn't by the hour. They paid by the load, and the load's pay was considered from city limit to city limit. In other words, when they were trying to figure out what they were going to pay you, they didn't consider all that time you were driving within city limits. They just considered the time from city limit to city limit. Once you entered the city, you weren't getting paid. Okay. And in the end, what it ended up resulting in is you getting paid probably once you knew what you were doing and you could do everything right and you knew where all your stops was and all of that, you end up making somewhere between like maybe $14, $15 an hour. Okay. So anyway, we're about to bring in the union. Fast forward. Our pay is about to go up immensely. What we were discussing at that time, we're talking about pay that was going to be somewhere like around 20 something bucks an hour. Okay. Benefits were going to be much better because our benefits sucked and they were very expensive. We were talking a pension. Okay. Everybody was on board with the union. And one day I came to work. Once again, this is a situation where I'm showing up at on the scene a little earlier than usual, showed up for work. And the reason I did that, well, I remember because there was this nice little breakfast place there that served excellent pancakes. Wow, they were great. So I wanted to show up for work to eat pancakes. And, the breakfast went a little bit faster than I anticipated. So I ended up showing up for work a little bit early, which was cool because we got paid by the load and you could start early if you wanted to. So I just said, well, I'll just go ahead and, get my route going. I'll go up here and get loaded with fuel or whatever and go ahead and start my route. So I show up for work. The sun is not yet up and the lights are on inside. And I go inside once again. I'm thinking to myself, wow, did I miss something? Is this supposed to be some kind of meeting? Because now I'm also noticing a good number of guys inside. Odd thing is, same situation. I walk into the room, nothing but white guys. Now, the ratio at our company was about half and half, and then we had a couple of Latinos too. We're talking about a staff of maybe about 25 guys, and all white guys in this meeting early in the morning before the sun comes up, coffee out, and donuts spread across the table. I immediately knew that this was a meeting I was not supposed to go to. So I walked back out. And a guy that was a coworker of mine, he came out when the meeting was over. And he told me, he said, man, you are not going to believe what they were talking about in that meeting. I said, what were they talking about? He said they were trying to down talk the union. I said, well, that doesn't surprise me. He said, yeah, but what I'm about to tell you next may surprise you. The whole meeting was about the fact that if we go union, they were telling certain guys they would not be able to show them favoritism, basically based on race. That if we become union, they're going to have to treat the black guys the same way that they treat them, that they would no longer be able to show them favoritism. And that favoritism was based on race. This was something that was not unknown. We knew that this happened. There was a whole lot of stuff that was going on before this, and it was only part of the reason why we were ready to bring in the union. But because everybody knew that the pay was going to increase, the pension was going to be there, and et cetera, everybody wanted the union, including the racists. But apparently what the racists had not thought about was that in a union environment, while you can exercise racism, it's just a little bit more difficult. Okay. These guys who were for the union, when they heard that, they turned on a dime and changed their minds. and voted against the union. They showed a prime example of the type of mentality of the type of Southern white person. Not all Southern white people, but that type that you hear everybody says vote and make decisions against their own interests. That was a prime example of that for me. Now, I was surprised by that. The fact that men would deprive their families of more money coming into the household, a pension that will be coming into to them when they're retired, just an overall better life for them and their families, better medical coverage, things of that nature, in order to protect their white privilege. I was a little bit astonished by that, but it happened. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. That is common. That's a part of the struggle to bring unions into Southern businesses. Because many times the white people in Southern businesses, especially in environments like trucking and warehouses and things of that nature, that is a part of it. White people being treated with favoritism in very open ways, sometimes not so open, sometimes very open. Now, the third story is about me actually working for a company that is union, and it was union when I got there. And in this story, I'm going to be able to give you examples of what I'm talking about. And keep in mind, this is a union. So you can only imagine what it's like working for companies that are non-union in the South when it comes to the brothers fighting against white privilege and competing with their white counterparts who many times don't really do anything in terms of working. In other words, the things that they get, our white counterparts, many times it's not due to merit. Many times it is due to the fact that they are white. And I'm going to be able to tell you examples of that in this third story. Okay, so now this is a story where we're really going to be able to get into the nitty-gritty of why a lot of Southern white people have a hard time voting for the union. Now, to be clear, you have favoritism everywhere. They have it on the job where I am now. And I don't live in Atlanta anymore. I don't live in Georgia. But they have it on the job where I am now. There are some people, when they get a job and they go to work, they don't just go to work. They go to work and they start politicking. They start schmoozing up to the management. They immediately start trying to figure out how they can get some kind of favoritism. And that sort of thing, it exists. And it exists on my job where I am now. The job where I am now is pretty cool. It's not a bad job at all whatsoever. Nothing like what I'm about to get into now, when I'm going to tell you about the job that I worked at in the South. But you still have that favoritism thing. And if you don't call it out, you will look around and find that someone is getting something over you that they should not get. And a lot of times the favoritism has nothing to do with them, being some super employee or whatever. It's not based on merit at all. It's just based on the fact that, some people just go to work and do their job. Some people do a little bit more than that. They go to work and they get all into all the trying to socialize and get all close to management and all that. And, look, that's cool. And, I don't mind that. But when somebody, does that and I'm going to be the victim of it, I speak out and I let it be known that I'm not going to tolerate it. But anyway, this is completely different than that. What I'm about to tell you now, all of this is obviously based on race. So, and you did have some favoritism. Like I said, that exists everywhere. But for example, the first part of the story is going to be what I like to call the Teamsters for Obama t-shirt incident. Now, as we all know, President Barack Obama was America's first black president. And after he was elected, first of all, let me say this. On my job, it was in the contract that you weren't supposed to wear anything that had paraphernalia on it that wasn't company related. You couldn't wear a team, like a sports shirt with the Patriots on it, the Chicago Cubs, et cetera, et cetera. You couldn't do that. Not even Nike. You couldn't even wear nothing. You couldn't wear a old raggedy polo. Like if you work in the dock, you couldn't wear a raggedy old polo shirt. That was technically what you could not do in the contract. But people were doing it. It was to the point where so many people were doing it, even management was doing it. You couldn't discipline anybody for it because it was a common practice for people to do it. Okay. People will wear shirts, political shirts and things of that nature. They will wear anything that they wanted. Well, after Obama won the election, and by the way, I know someone out there is probably going to say something, but I was highly disappointed in with Obama, how he let the unions down or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. He won. He had just gotten elected, and me and some coworkers. And I decided to purchase some Teamsters for Obama t-shirts that were sold on the Teamsters website. We were Teamsters. So we bought the shirts. We all wore them to work one day. And boy, let me tell you, now you would think it would be the management that would say something about it, but it wasn't the management. It was actually our white coworkers who had a problem with it. And they went to management about it. So fast forward, a black manager, and yeah, they did have black managers, we'll get into that later, came up to us, they had an expression on their face like they were told to do something that they didn't want to do. They were very embarrassed by it. They pretty much knew exactly why it was being done, and basically he was sent over to us to tell us that we needed to take the t-shirts off. So at this point, it became a big deal because the first thing we were told was it's in the contract that you can't wear anything that states anything about politics. And we were like, wait a minute, that is true, but it is also true that you can't wear anything that says anything about anything. Like right now, from where we're standing right now, we can see several people with different things on, a couple of guys with their favorite college team caps on. In fact, two of the guys who were the main complainers, they had on sports paraphernalia, old sports t-shirts, because they were working on the dock that day. They weren't driving. So we pointed that out and we said, yeah, you're not really supposed to wear anything that says anything at all whatsoever. You're not even supposed to wear a designer shirt on the job. If you wear something and it says something on the job, it's only supposed to say something about the company, right? So he knew we were right. And we got into a big back and forth. We went to meet with management and we told management, now they're getting upset because they know that they also wear, things that say different things. A couple of them were big college fans. A couple of them had, kids that played different sports at college or whatever, and they wore the college paraphernalia. And they actually had some of it in their office. That wasn't even supposed to be there. So we basically told them, hey, if we have to stop wearing this, everyone is going to have to stop wearing anything that says anything at all whatsoever on it. And we're going to have to go strictly by the contract. These guys knew they didn't want to do that, but they were so racist and they hated Obama so much that they agreed to do that. Now, of course, they tested us a couple of times. They tried to, slowly bring back, wearing sports paraphernalia. The management did and all that. And, look, we would just say, hey, look, we see you have on your cap. So does that mean that we can wear our Obama t-shirts again? And, they would get fuming mad, right? Now, this is a union company. Okay, this is a union company that hates President Obama so much. Now, keep in mind, Obama had just gotten elected. You know, Obama had not really yet had a chance to do anything either way. You know, but so the only reason they hated Obama to this point was the fact that he was black. Right? So that kind of blew over and you know, they eventually got it that, hey, look, you just can't, now that you've done that, now that you put your foot in it, you can't wear anything that says anything on it anymore, period. So the next subject is really even more interesting than that. Because actually, if corporate would have ever found out what they were doing in this next incident that I'm going to tell you about, somebody would have gotten a whole lot of trouble, because there was basically money being wasted big time, right? So when it came to overtime, the rule was simply this. Overtime was dispensed according to seniority. In other words, if somebody wanted to work some overtime to do a run somewhere or something like that, you had to start by going down the list, asking people from the most senior to the least senior if they want to do it. Or you have to put up something on the wall telling people to sign up for it. And then you would take it from there and take the most senior people on the list. Either way, you had to go by seniority. If a person with less seniority did a job task that was overtime and a more senior person was not asked and they wanted to do it, the company had to pay that senior person, even though they didn't do it. Now, my first few years there, this rarely ever happened because, of course, you know, if you know you got to go by seniority and you know you're going to end up having to pay a person who didn't even do the job, you're not going to do that. Well, it got to a point where logic went straight out of the window. So it got to a point where we had hired some guys, a group of guys. And within that group of guys, there were a couple of guys, I guess they had their own reasons why they always wanted to work overtime. They were overtime hungry. But the thing is, they were low in seniority, so it was kind of hard for them to get overtime other than on a daily basis, you know, doing 10 hours or 11 hours or something like that. But if there was like an assignment or something that you could sign up for, that you could do, like you might come in on a Saturday and do a run somewhere or something like that, it was hard for them to get in like that because they were low in seniority. Okay. So of course, not everybody likes seniority, but among the guys who like seniority and who frequently worked it before these guys came, most of them were like pretty senior guys. So what they started doing, believe it or not, instead of turning their white comrades down for overtime, what they would do, they would give them the overtime task, and then they would pay the brother, because a lot of times it was a brother that wanted to do it. They would pay that brother even though he did not go to work. It got to a point where it was just accepted. Like they would go ahead and just give the overtime to the white person, even though they weren't supposed to do it. They were supposed to give it to the brother that wanted to do it. And eventually the sister, because there did come a time when they hired a couple of female drivers. But in other words, imagine this. I want to do this particular task, right? If I'm asked and someone comes up and tells me it's available, I'm going to take it. But they don't tell me it's available. Instead, they go straight to the white guy who has less seniority than me. They give it to him. He actually works that day and he actually does it. And the way it started out, I would have to find out about it. And then if I found out about it and I wrote a grievance on it, then they would pay me for that day too. So they would pay the white guy with less seniority and they would end up paying me. Whatever he worked, they would have to pay me. If he worked 10 hours that day, they'd have to pay me for 10 hours. If he worked 6 hours, they'd have to pay me for 6. Okay. So it got to a point where they were so determined to do this You no longer even needed to fill out a grievance. They would just go ahead and just give the task to the white person and then just go ahead and cut the check to the black person who wanted to come in and work overtime that day. So rather than to deny these white people who wanted to do overtime but couldn't do it because they didn't have the seniority, they would go ahead and give it to them anyway, and then they would just turn right around and cut a check to the black person who really should have been doing it in the first place. And, you know, a lot of guys were like, okay, so if you want to do that, that's cool. And to be honest with you, I didn't think that was going to last long, but it did. In fact, my last day there, they were still doing that. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of whites in the South don't want, because without the union, the brother that wanted to do the overtime who had the seniority, if it was a brother, he wouldn't have had any recourse. There wouldn't have been anything that he could do. There wouldn't have been a contract. He would have been just working in a right to work environment, and the company can do whatever they wanted to do, regardless of how much seniority he had, regardless of how long he'd been there, whatever. It wouldn't matter. But at least with this, the brother could get paid. White dude had to come to work. He actually had to do the work. Brother sitting at home looking at, college football on a Saturday, tossing back a couple of beers, and he's getting paid like he's at work, but he's not at work. So that's really deep when you think about it. I mean, you're willing to waste company money like that just to exercise white privilege / racism. So this place, as you can see, was really something special. But like I said, it's just a reason why a lot of whites in the South don't want their companies to become union, because they know that if a company becomes union, they won't be able to get any white privilege extended to them, at least not without attachments to it. Like those white guys, yeah, they got to do the overtime, but that entire time they were doing that overtime, a brother was getting paid for it, and he wasn't even at work. So that's just an example of why a lot of companies in the South have a hard time becoming union. Now, a next example I want to tell you about is really something that I noticed early on when I got hired. When I got hired, we were among the first large, by the way, this is a Fortune 500 company. I'm not going to say the name of the company because it's really not important. But it was a Fortune 500 company. They suddenly got on some new business or whatever, and they needed to hire a whole lot of people. And I was within that first group of people who got hired. And when we came in, a lot of the guys who had been there for a very long time. They had a lot of guys who were coming up for retirement. And one of the things we noticed was that we would be out on the dock. Now, this is a place where you're a driver dockman. You're both a dock worker and a driver. We would be out on the dock busting our tails. And as you can imagine, in Georgia, it's hot, right? Even if the dock is shaded, it's still hot. So we'd be out there working, man. And a lot of times, a lot of dudes quit this job. This job, by the way, wasn't an easy job at all whatsoever. A lot of dudes, and we got paid very well. And we had good benefits, the whole 9 yards, great pension, whole 9 yards. A lot of people would come in, man, and work the job. The first week, gone, quit, right? So anyway, we're out here working. And it didn't take long for us to notice that while we're out here working, we would notice that the only people working on the dock would be Latinos and black dudes. We'd be the only ones. And all the white dudes would be sitting in the break room, just sitting in there, not on break, just sitting in there, reading the paper, looking at videos, chatting it up, whatever. So of course, this was so incredible, we decided that we'd observe this over a matter of days. And it was exactly what we thought it was. It was so absurd that we could not believe what we were seeing, even though we were sitting right there looking at it. So what we decided to do was rather than to say something like right away, we took notes of everything. And we decided what we would do is that we would go in the break room too. We would just stop working and just go in the break room and sit right in there with the white guys. I lie to you not. We wouldn't be in that break room. If we were in there 5 minutes, that's probably the longest we were ever in there before management would come in and basically say, all right, guys, everybody got to get out the break room. You got to go to work. We did that several times. And we honestly, as infuriating as that might seem, we could not help but to laugh at the fact that we basically had the power to clear out the break room. All we had to do was go in there. You know how sometimes black people laugh at the fact that, back in the day, I don't know if that's so prevalent now, but a lot of black people laugh at, hey, if you ever want the pool, man, to yourself, just, go up there to the pool. All those white people will leave and then you'll have a pool to yourself. So, it was kind of like that sort of thing. Only you didn't get to stay in the break room. You had to leave too. But it was just amazing to see how quickly management would come in there and clear out the break room after you've been sitting there watching these white guys, sometimes for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, a little over an hour or whatever. But you go in there and you can't even be in there 5 minutes before management comes in and tell everybody they have to leave. Okay. And sometimes it will be a black manager. And while I'm talking about that, they had black management. But a lot of them would be honest if you were black and say, hey, look, I'm black just like you. We both see what's going on here. It's not that I don't see it, but hey, come on, man. What exactly is it that you expect for me to do? And as a brother, you kind of work with them on it, because you understand their situation. They're not covered by the union. They're working under right to work circumstances, and they could get fired just like that. And a lot of the people, the white guys who were driver dockmen, they were friends with a lot of management. Their children played on the same baseball team as them. A couple of them took fishing trips together and all that. So you understood the situation. So even though there was black management, they really had less power than we did because at least we were covered by the contract. We were covered by the Teamsters. So they basically were powerless to do anything about it. But that's kind of a perfect segue over into the next subject, which was the office personnel. Now, prior to me being hired, the office personnel at one time was also union. They managed to talk them into dropping the union. Okay. So now this particular company, they had a policy. They really put a lot of stock in college education. And you basically sign something if you're working in the office that basically says that no matter how long you've been working for the company, no matter how much experience you have, you do understand that someone could get a promotion over you just based over the fact that they have a college degree. So that was understood by everybody. You worked, that was in the paperwork. When you got hired, you signed it saying you understood it. So, like I said, when I came, they had dropped the union. They no longer were union. So what was happening in the office was one of the managers that I would often go head to head with, I had no idea that he was doing this on this level until the what hit the fan. He was actually promoting people from our location to go to corporate who were white and mostly had no college education. The problem is that there were a number of black people who worked in the office who came onto the company with aspirations of not staying there. They wanted to go up through the company. They wanted to go to corporate. They were just coming in there to work their way up. And he was looking over them and he was promoting people to be promoted to the corporate office based on the fact that they were white, and that was it. These people had no college education at all whatsoever, and he was not literally not promoting any of the black people in the office who had a college education. None of them. So, of course, I didn't work in the office. I'm not the one that brought this to light, but there was a brother who used to be a driver who had a college education, and he switched over and started working in the administration. He started working in the office. He was the one that brought it up because he had been looked over. He had said early on, even as a driver, that that's what he wanted to do, that him and his wife had often debated about whether or not it was a good idea because, of course, once he went to the office, he was going to end up getting much lower pay. He was still going to have good benefits and all that, but the pay was going to be much, much lower, especially when you take away the overtime. Okay, because they didn't get overtime. They got a salary. This white dude did not promote any black people, college education or not, degree or not. If you were black, you were not going to get promoted and you were not going to be sent to corporate. Well, he put in the right paperwork, made the right moves. I don't know exactly what he did, but let's just say that manager who I hated with a passion, I hated this guy with a passion. He had obviously crossed the line at that point. And you can tell that that's what got him in trouble. To save face, they didn't get rid of him immediately. He was able to stick around for a while. But all of a sudden, a lot of black people started getting promoted from the corporate office. All of a sudden. And you started noticing that this guy wasn't, he used to patrol around looking for, things looking to mess with people. And he even stopped doing that. He just stayed completely out of sight until the last day he was gone, which was good with us. I wasn't the only one that felt that way about him. But so there was that. So look, guys, what I'm trying to tell you is that in the South, white privilege, racism, whatever you want to call it, is still very much a thing. Now, this thing with Amazon isn't over. From what I understand, a couple of locations out here on the West Coast are also fighting to get the union. And from what I understand, even in Alabama, it's not technically over, though it's probably technically over. But there are Amazon locations who are still trying to get the union. But I can tell you, now I don't know what's going to happen out there, but I can tell you that in the South, it is particularly hard to combat it because you have so much favoritism, white privilege / racism. It's still a part of the culture there. It's still a part of the culture there. And like I said, I've seen white guys who were down for the union, excited for the union, going to vote for the union, have a meeting where it's made clear that their white privilege is going to disappear, and they suddenly just change their minds. They are willing to sacrifice their family's future to keep the white privilege. And I guess to them, the white privilege is like a gold American Express card. They put that kind of value on it. And, now out in LA, they're probably going to have some people who are favored by the company who come in, those people I was talking about earlier who schmooze and get in with management, and management get their little pets and all that, and a lot of people to them they can't just go to work. They can't just go to work and do the damn job. They got to go to work and do some politicking too, and that's what they do. And those of us that don't do that, we always end up getting the short end of the stick. So, but they more than likely will not have the racism factor involved, because I have seen a battle for the union out here, where even there was a lot of black people who wasn't in favor of the union at particular companies. I wasn't working for those companies, but I knew the people who were working there. And there are a lot of people, black, Latino, or whatever, they survive. They are the ones coming to work who want to try to come in before you, even though you were there 10 years, even though you work harder than them, you produce just like they do or whatever, but they still want to be able to come on the job and come in before you do. They want an early start time. They want all these things that you normally don't get until you stay there for a certain period of time. They want some favoritism, and they come in the door trying to get it. and many of them are successful at getting it. And once they get it, and once they learn how to work that system, they don't want to change it with the union, because they know, hey, all that favoritism I worked hard to get, man, that's just going to disappear. It's going to be all about seniority after that. And a lot of people like to try to pretend like it's merit or whatever. Let me tell you something about a union contract. A union contract goes both ways. You also have to produce. There is they word it in a way where you have to come to work and produce so much. They have to be able to look in the system and see where you did so much work that day. You can't just come to work and just not work. That contract can work against you just like it could work for you. I've seen a lot of dudes slip. When I say slip mentally, and end up letting that contract get them fired because they come to work and do something stupid, and then they have to go home and tell their wife or their husband or whatever they no longer have a job because they did something stupid. So a lot of people like to try to act like, well, it's not about kissing butt or anything like that. It's just that sometimes, you get on a job and person been there for a while and, they're not doing their job. They're lazy. And then you come in and you're working gangbusters and you're moving and shaking things. And, you should get those things before they do because you produce. No, that's BS. A lot of you guys just like to get on jobs and you like to kiss butt. And a lot of people like to kiss butt because they don't want to work, because they don't want to, work for things the traditional way. They want to get in, come to a job and start getting things based on favoritism. So sometimes the people who want things based on favoritism, they can also be difficult to deal with when it comes to trying to get a union on a job. Some people just don't want to do it. They just don't want to do it. They'd rather stay in the system where they can get things based on the favoritism that they have established, especially if they've been there for a while. They don't want to change it. And they know that once they get a union in, there are going to be certain things that they're doing that they're no longer going to be able to do. But anyway, we're going to cut it right there, guys. And until the next video, as always, stay safe.